Today's guest is Mike Crowley, and in this episode we're going to explore the intersection between psychedelics and Buddhism. We're going to look at Mike's research into the secret drugs of Buddhism and different ancient scriptures and what he's uncovered in his work. Fascinating exploration, and Mike is a lovely character. Unfortunately, I can't actually find the video for this episode that I filmed, so part of it's going to be quite low quality if you're watching on YouTube, but if you're listening, it shouldn't really make a difference. I hope you're going to enjoy the show either way, and stay tuned because there's plenty more good stuff to come through the channel. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, click the little notification bell so you don't miss any of that if you are watching on YouTube. And if you're checking out the show at an audio only channel like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, then I invite you to leave a review. Let me know what you think about the show, and hit subscribe if you're enjoying and getting some value out of the conversations. If you're enjoying the show and you want to take things a little bit further, maybe you want to connect on a deeper level by supporting, then the number one way to do that, to support the transmission of these mindful media vibes out into the interconnected sphere of shared space, is to join the Today Dreamer tribe. You can do that by heading over to patreon.com/todaydreamer. Not only that will that help me keep this show alive, but it also supports the intention or what the show stands for. So I'll give you a bit of a rundown on Mike's background. He was born in Wales in 1948, and in 1966 he started studying with a Tibetan Lama. He became an Upasaka of the Kag Yud lineage in 1970. Mike has lectured at various museums and universities and has been published 14 times in the Journal of Archaeology, Consciousness and Culture, Psychedelic American and Psychedelic Press UK. He's also received the Gordon Wasson Award for outstanding contributions to the field of entheobotany. He currently serves on the advisory board of the Psychedelic Sangha, a group of psychedelically inclined Buddhists based in New York, and teaches at the Dharma Collective in San Francisco. So, shall we get into things? Ben, so we won't worry about that. There we go.
Oh, it suddenly said it's recording. Just a minute.
Yeah.
Continue. Okay, I've hit continue.
All right. Well, what I usually do for the podcasts is I invite the guests and the listeners to have a moment of presence with me and just kind of take a deep breath in, and we can just kind of connect with our breath for a moment. I think it gives people a nice way to pause in the middle of whatever they're doing, and also gives us a nice chance to kind of drop into this space together. It seems like we've both come from kind of frantic or semi-frantic state of being, or from different kind of like setting up all the audio and everything. So it's nice to just take a moment.
Yeah.
So
yeah, always nice.
Let's have a breath together then, and then we can get into things. So I invite everyone listening to also just take a moment and close your eyes when you're ready. And allow yourself to take a conscious and slow inhale in through the nose, into the belly as slow as you can, taking a moment to pause at the top. Appreciate that space, and a moment at the bottom as well. Whenever you're ready, in your own time, feel free to synchronize the opening of your eyes with your exhale, and we can begin from this space with one another. So where should we begin? I feel like there's so many roads we could take, Mike, with this one. So many facets of your work that interest me, and I've got an abundance of questions ready to go. But I guess, yeah, I don't know if you're open to it. Maybe you could share a little bit about. Well, I find your background quite fascinating, and how you came into the, how this link between ancient traditions and psychedelics came into your kind of conscious awareness, and how you kind of began that journey of exploration. Might be a place to start the conversation, if you're open to it.
Oh, sure. I discovered Buddhism and psychedelics approximately the same time. And at first, I didn't realize that there was any ancient historical connection. I'd read Alan Watts' book, The Joyous Cosmology, in which he described how LSD could be used as a tool with Buddhism in mind. But it wasn't until I had an experience which was in the company of friends and people who were mainly doing cannabis tincture, which was available for a brief period on the British National Health while cannabis was illegal. But it was legal to have cannabis tincture if you were prescribed it. And a friend of mine was prescribed it. It cost sixpence for a bottle of tincture, which a bottle was a pint bottle, and we calculated it to contain 72 full-on, flat-out experiences. So it was pretty good value for sixpence. But I was afraid that I was going to just like zone out and be completely zombie-like for the entire experience. So I took a third. I'd been given a third of a pill, which was an orange sunshine pill, which was available at the time, of LSD, orange sunshine LSD, made by someone who later became a friend of mine. So on a third of a tab of LSD, which turned out to be well strong enough, given his later disclosures about how strong these tablets were. So I started by standing on the patio of my friend's house in the country and the home counties which surround London. There was a turkey farm next door. The sun had just gone down, and I said to my friend who was standing next to me, "Oh, look at the fireflies." And he said, "What fireflies?" As he said, "What fireflies?" the points of light which had revealed themselves to me traced an intricate pattern of knotwork across the sky. And I said, "Oh, never mind. And I went and sat down in the living room to listen to Bach's Art of the Fugue, which was playing on my friend's hi-fi system. And I closed my eyes, and to my surprise, I witnessed what seemed to be three entirely new dimensions. That is to say, the dimension of time was the same as normal, but the dimensions of space had been replaced by completely other dimensions of space. These seem to be at right angles to normal, our normal quotidian experiences of left, right, up, down, forward, backward. And this new space was filled with regularly arranged spheres of completely limpid crystal. They were absolutely transparent, and each crystal reflected every other crystal in the array. Not only that, but the entire being of each crystal was only its reflection of every other crystal in the array. In other words, this entire array depended on its entirety for every portion of it to exist. And I watched this in rapt attention for, I don't know, a minute, a half an hour, a century. I don't know. Time was irrelevant to me, although I say it was transpiring at the usual rate. We were no longer bound by the experience of time. And so, having experienced this, I was immensely impressed. Oh, I should say that at the same time, each crystal was a wave packet, and it was modulated by the waves in every other wave packet in this universe. So I was seeing the crystals as particles, but I was also aware of their wave nature at the same time. Now, some months after this, I read a book called the Buddhist Theory of Totality by Gama C.C. Chang. And he described the phenomenon, or the experience known as the Indra's net. And he described it as an experience of interpenetration, which was pointed out by the founder of the Avatamsaka school of Buddhism in medieval China, which became the Kegon school of Japan. And not only that, Tu Shung, I think his name was, describe what I had already seen, but he mentioned that it was described in greater detail in the Avatamsaka Sutra, which, of course, I had to look up. And I was astonished that somebody centuries ago, centuries before my experience, could explain and describe my experience in minute detail. He didn't mention the wave particle duality, because I believe that wave packets wasn't a part of medieval Chinese vocabulary. But apart from that, it was identical to what I'd seen. And I realized that there were one or two explanations of this. Either I had found a back door into a profound Buddhist state, that back door consisting of the combined use of a teaspoon of cannabis tincture and a third of a tablet of LSD, or the medieval Buddhists of China had used this substance also. They had used not necessarily LSD, but perhaps mushrooms or some other psychedelic. Either way, whichever of these two explanations was the correct one, I found that this confirmed my use of psychedelics as a tool to reach various Buddhist heights, and continued to take LSD for this purpose. And I decided to keep on meditating, but to occasionally adjust my my meditations, if you like, by the application of LSD and occasionally psilocybin mushrooms. So that's basically what confirmed my use of psychedelics. And as I had more experience with Buddhism, at this point, I had only officially become a Buddhist a few months before. But over the following years, I found that there were more and more evidences of psychedelic use. And eventually, I was telling a friend of mine about this in the 1990s, about the various bits of evidence I picked up. And he said, you should write a book about this. Well, I did, and it took me 25 years to get it all down on paper. And that was my book, Secret Drugs of Buddhism. Of course, I have various initiations or empowerments into certain deities, and there are parts of those initiations which seem to be about psychedelic mushrooms. I would love to discuss this with anyone who has had the body mandala of Chakrasamvara empowerment, according to the tradition of Luipa. But as yet, I've found no one with that qualification. And so I am bound to secrecy as to what these intimations may have been.
It'd be very interesting to be a fly on the wall during that discussion.
Yeah, I'm sure it would. But as I'm bound to secrecy about the initiation, it has to remain secret until I find someone who has also undergone the same initiation.
Yeah.
So that was basically how it came about, that I put two and two together.
And you were saying that this was kind of during the initial stages of your Buddhist practice or journey into that exploration, and now you're a Lama, if I'm correct.
Yes, this happened in 1970, the same year that I took refuge from my teacher, and in 1989, January the 1st, 1989, I became a Lama. Was ordained by the very same teacher. and he's still alive. I'm still with him, and I saw him a couple of years ago in England where he lives. Um, but now I'm officially at his level. I'm a lama, and I can tell people how to meditate, and tell people um, what various symbols mean and what have you. So
How would you say the psychedelic experiences inform the process or that journey from those early days through to becoming a lama and beyond?
um, it's difficult to sum it up
Yeah.
in that um, there are so many different psychedelic experiences. There are possibly as many as the number of times you've taken the psychedelic. Um, I would say that all in all, it helps you um, see the nature of mind. You could explain the behavior of mind as being like a television set or a cinema screen. Um, you can see dramas and comedies and thrillers and horror films, but throughout all these experiences, it's all on the same screen. You have to realize that all these experiences are just experiences. Meanwhile, you're watching colored points of light on a screen. It's if we're talking about television, it's still the same television. It's the same screen that it was when you first turned it on, and it's the same when you turn it off. The pictures which appear on it are brief, transitory, and their effects, the emotions which they evoke are similarly brief and varied and so on. LSD helps you to witness the nature of mind itself, to see the nature of the screen, to use the analogy.
It just seems as though, if out of those two options that you gave earlier, if the drugs of ancient times were used to reach these states, if that is the case, then it seems as though the psychedelics would provide this is a one way of putting it, but like an acceleration of that process, or even an opening that couldn't be obtained otherwise, seemingly. Do you have any thoughts on that, or do you feel like it's more supportive, or that's kind of?
Well, I have thought about this, and I've thought that whether it does or does not, it doesn't really matter. This immense animal which is just impinged on our consciousness here is my cat, who likes to be part of everything that I do.
Yeah, we met last time. You were saying that he doesn't leave your side.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. He was, and he's jealous of you now. So it's this is a similar question to the question I've been asked many times: is how would you have proceeded with Buddhism if you hadn't taken psychedelics? So I've no idea. I did take psychedelics, so I can't really put myself in any position where I didn't.
Yeah.
So
would you have proceeded differently, knowing that knowing what you know now through the experience of taking the psychedelics?
I have no idea.
Who knows, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Who knows?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, this idea of, and this is probably another question you've been asked, probably been asked quite a few times, and it's just something I want to cover because I wanted to just get in kind of, it just seems like an obvious thing to tick off before we kind of go a little bit deeper in one direction or another. But the fifth precept and the idea of clouding the mind, and it obviously depends on your perspective of this psychedelic experience and whether that's clouding or really clearing in a sense. Based on what you're saying, it seems like the latter. But how do you approach
I
that?
would definitely say the latter.
Yeah.
And to people who put this question to me, I ask them, well, are you a Buddhist?
Mm-hmm.
Did you take this precept? You don't have to take that precept to be a Buddhist. You don't have to take any precepts.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to vow not to kill, not to lie, not to steal, not to commit sexual adultery, and not to drink alcohol, which is what I did. I took all those. It did not say you don't take drugs which will cloud the mind. It said you will not drink alcohol. In fact, it was more specific than that. It was in Tibetan, and it said you won't drink chang. Chang being Tibetan beer. I thought, well, that's an easy one to keep.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I did keep that for 20 years until I took the Nyingtik Yabshi empowerment, which said you must take, there are 14 vows which come with every empowerment. And they're slightly different for everyone. And for the Nyingtik Yabshi, it said you will take a small amount, a token amount of Amrita every day, even if it's only alcohol. So this was a vow which superseded the earlier vows, and said that you will take alcohol if you treat it as Amrita. Now, admittedly, it was talking about a token amount of alcohol, as it was talking about token amounts of Amrita, which, by the way, I told this to Jim Fadiman, who was delighted with it because he saw this as an ancient precursor of microdosing. Now, the earliest versions of this vow were about alcohol, because alcohol was the only popularly available psychoactive substance at the time. And if you read the Vinaya, the monastic rules, and behind every monastic rule, there's a story or set of stories in the Vinaya which explain why this isn't to be done, why such and such a rule is put in place. And in the Vinaya, it speaks only of alcohol. And there are no other drugs. And it was only after various foreign drugs made their way into India, drugs like opium, that the fifth precept was changed to drugs that cloud the mind. So it depends on whether you've taken the vow. What vow did you take?
It's also a matter of making that vow your own in your own way.
Well, yes, you always interpret the vow in the 5 vows or 10 vows for, there are special vows which you take for special days. It's always a matter of making them your own, and taking them seriously.
Yeah.
I don't mean that you should find ways around it.
Mm.
That's not what I'm sure that's not what you meant by making them your own. But um, it's if you just have a glass of wine with your meals, that could be seen um, as not taking a drug which clouds the mind, as it doesn't cloud the mind very much at all. However, it still does, and
Mm.
it should be observed. And so I didn't take alcohol in any form for 20 years until I took the Nyingtik Yabshi empowerments. I did, however, take a sip of alcohol at Ghana Chakras, which is the tantric feast where you take you nibble on a bit of meat, usually a slice of salami, and have a sip of wine.
Mm.
Um, However, I now believe that this was originally that these meats were not um, intended to represent actual meat, not the flesh of animals. And the amritas, the 5 amritas, were never intended to be the 5 disgusting bodily fluids which are described as being the 5 amritas. So the meats, by the way, are cow, horse, dog, elephant, and human.
So you think they're like a symbolic representation of something
I
else?
I believe that they were symbolically 5 different psychedelic plants and fungi, and that the 5 amritas were the substances which were derived from these from the meats, so that they would be teas made from whatever dog meant, that would be one tea. Whatever human meant, that would be another tea, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And so the five amritas, if I can remember them correctly, are blood, urine, pus, piss, and brains. Blood, urine, pus, piss. Yeah, blood, urine, pus, piss, and brains.
Mm.
So I really don't believe that medieval sadhakas were able to obtain fresh elephant meat every month, although they might find human meat in the smashana where they celebrated the, um, the cremation ground where they were supposed to celebrate it. In Sanskrit, it's called smashana.
I find it interesting how you kind of, the research that must have been done to kind of get into the finer detail of all of this. And I think you've kind of, yeah, just from what I've absorbed of yours, it seems like you've done quite a lot. I actually, speaking of urine, I need to go pee at the moment. So do you mind if we just pause this for like
You
1
may
minute?
pause.
All right, I'll be back in a moment.
Well, okay, Amrita literally is immortality, and it's considered in the Rig Veda to be a synonym for soma.
And what's the Rig Veda, sorry?
Oh, the Rig Veda is the oldest religious scripture in the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In fact, it was not actually written down until the 19th century. Well, it was written down once in the 14th century for the Mughals. But apart from that, it wasn't written down until the British, the Raj, which incidentally is not pronounced Raj, it's Raj. And they were the British rulers of India. And they said, "Hey, what's this stuff that you keep reciting, you Brahmins being the high priest, the priests who were the highest caste of all, they recited the book and had done ritually since it was first composed about 2000 BC. And so the British wrote this book down in 13 different places in India. And there were only some very minor differences in the various redactions which were available in different parts of India where they spoke different languages. And so even though they didn't understand what they were reciting, they were not only reciting Sanskrit, which they were familiar with and did understand, they were reciting Vedic Sanskrit, which is an older and more archaic form.
So where does the immortality fit into the picture?
So Amrita is as I said, a synonym for Soma. Soma was a drink which kept the gods immortal, which is why it's called Amrita. Mri, death, ta, ness, not deathness or immortality anyway. So Soma was a drink which was made during a specific ritual called the Agnihotra or the Yajna. And the Rig Veda are a set of chants which accompany this ritual. The ritual involves the sacrifice of an animal, and then a fire is built on a hearth of 108 bricks, shaped like a bird. And the soma is pressed out between two stones, and either water or milk is added to help to produce the liquid. The liquid is then strained through sheep's wool into a large vessel called the samudra or ocean, and it's then ladled out from the samudra. First of all, it is offered to the fire. It's offered to basically three gods, to Agni, the god of fire, Indra, the king of the gods, and Rudra, the god of the soma drink itself. Sometimes he is called Soma, sometimes Rudra. And various synonyms are used for poetic purposes for the process called elegant variation, so that you don't use the same word every time in say in all the lines of a hymn. You would call it Soma on one occasion, Amrita on the next, Shukra after that. And
what's the reason for that? Is it coming to secrecy at all? And there seems to be an element of secrecy.
No, it's just the poetic aesthetic, which was part of their culture. It's the same in English. If you're writing a letter to someone in English,
not going to use the same word over and over. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, many languages like Tibetan don't have this. They don't have this notion of poetic, elegant variation.
But there was an element to in regards to secrecy, in regards to these older ancient texts, right? And that's why it seems like such a difficult task to do the research and piece things together and kind of see where kind of make little leaps and figure things out.
There were Now, Sanskrit, I should point out, is not a natural language. It was invented about 2000 BC as a lingua franca to enable the 5 Aryan tribes. These were the tribes that branched off from the Proto-Indo-Europeans and made it to India. And they spoke different dialects, different languages, and it was although they had the same caste system and so on. Of basically in this early period there were 3 castes: priests, warriors, and farmers, and they decided that the priests needed to be able to communicate in order to perform these rituals together. Rituals like the horse sacrifice, the Ashvamedha.
What's the reason for the sacrifice? Sorry, I'm just curious about that.
I have no idea. It seems that at some period of human development, people thought that the gods required blood, and that they were pleased by the killing of animals.
It seems to me there is, just in life, like there is need of sacrifice sometimes as an initiation into like a deeper state of being, or maybe that's not the best way of putting it, as some kind of an initiatory process into another kind of
it's often thought to be the case. I'm not sure if it is, though. In
like maybe not of an animal, but like to make it seems like sacrifices allow you to go deeper into something.
In Secret Drugs of Buddhism, I do tell the story of a Tibetan Vajrayana empowerment, an initiation, where we are all being given Amrita to drink. Now, I should say that in most modern initiations, the Amrita is either totally innocuous or like almost innocuous, as it is basically just some yellowish liquid with lots of blessings said over it. And
the lemon, lime, and bitters of the psychedelic world.
Exactly, yes. And so we were all standing in line waiting to get our like palmful of Amrita poured out for us. And this guy who I'd never met before said to me, "What do they expect us to do?" And I was a bit baffled. I just said, "Well, you know, when people bow, bow. And when they do something, you copy them." And he said, no, I mean, for the initiation, what do we have to do? And I was mystified by this. I was totally at a loss to explain what he was on about. But he was thinking of like fraternity initiations where you get paddled or something. Anyway, they filled his palm with Amrita and he held it up to me and said, "It looks like pee." And I had to admit it did look like pee. But and so I said, "My word, I think you're right." And just swigged it down and wiped it on my head like everybody in front of us was doing. And he was completely like taken aback by this. Of course, this was a long time before I realized that urine had been used as Amrita, and it was quite possibly the urine of the guru who had eaten Amanita muscaria mushrooms. And that's something else I point out in my book, is that Amanita muscaria mushrooms contain two substances. They contain a lot of substances, but there are two specific substances that I consider. One of them is the psychoactive muscimol, and the other is a far less psychoactive but much more toxic substance called ibotenic acid. Now, it is very possible that you can eat Amanita muscaria mushrooms and that in your body, your liver will convert a lot of the ibotenic acid, not all, but a lot of it into muscimol by decarboxylation. And when you drink your own urine after eating the mushroom, you get a double dose or even more than double dose of the psychoactive substance. Now, um, this may have been what Gampopa described when he gave Milarepa a block of tea, and he made tea with it. And just before he served it, he said, let's add some spice to it, and pissed in the pot of tea.
So this
But
happened in the story.
this happened supposedly in real life, um, in the encounter of Gampopa, who founded the Kaju lineage of Tibetan Buddhism, with his teacher Milarepa. And Gampopa says that his pissing in the tea made it extraordinarily delicious.
It's like a strange coincidence that these kind of things are linked. And there seems to be quite a few of these little linkages, right?
There do indeed. And they are scattered about Tibetan literature for the people who know. Now, it's quite common in India and in Tibet for tantrikas, people who practice tantra and the practices of tantra, the sadhanas, that they are known as those who drink piss and eat dung. Now, I have described the process of drinking piss, but what's eating dung? Well, psilocybe mushrooms grow out of dung, and in fact, they grow through it, but they appear to be an extension of the dung itself. They are part of the cow patty. And so by eating them, you are eating in the eyes of the ancient Indians who described it as eating dung itself, and that these are not separate fungi or plants. They are supposed to be part of the dung.
It's another interesting linkage.
Yeah, these descriptions. Now, you spoke about the fifth precept. Now, the Maha Tantras, which they're some of the more advanced tantras, the Maha Yoga Tantras, they have their own 5 precepts. Instead of saying don't kill, they say murder. And they mean that you should kill your own ego, your own notion of separate and abiding existence. When it says don't steal, it says steal. When it says don't lie, it says you must lie, you must tell lies. And um, when it says um, don't commit sexual improprieties, it says you must have sex only with your grandmother, your mother, your sister, or your daughter.
That doesn't sound very nice.
No, but what it actually means, as it's explained in the commentaries, your the mother of your guru's wife, someone else who has been initiated by your guru, or someone you have initiated yourself. They're not literal.
Mm.
And when it comes to the fifth precept, it says you must eat dung and drink urine.
Mm.
Now, it didn't say you must take drugs that cloud the mind. It didn't say you must drink alcohol. No, it said you must eat dung and drink urine. So this is obviously symbolic too, but it's not explained in the commentaries. And I had to put that together for myself. And because of that, I'm quite prepared to put it in a book and tell people about it. If I'd been told, well, hush about this, but it means Amanita muscaria and Psilocybe cubensis,
Be a
I
different
wouldn't be
story.
here. Yeah, I wouldn't be telling you about it.
So I'm fascinated, just to kind of go a little bit, just a question that's been kind of brewing is the idea of other ceremonial practices or aspects around this ancient kind of process of psychedelic use. And if you've been able to uncover any others, I'm just a little bit curious what kind of rituals they performed other than the sacrifice, other than this, drinking of
Do you mean within Buddhism or in other religions?
anything that you found would be interesting. But yeah, within Buddhism would be fascinating to know if there was just the ancient psychedelic use, if there were any kind of other ceremonial kind of practices or patterns that you've seen between the different traditions in that area, other than the actual taking of the sacrament.
Maybe I have to think about that. I do know that Dzongsa Chense Rinpoche, a very interesting Lama from Bhutan of the Sakya lineage, he has said about such substances that we have ways of using these, and he also mentioned, if you don't believe me, I can give you page numbers in the Tantras, which actually mention these drugs. And he is said to have used ayahuasca in his tantric feasts, as he has students in Brazil where such things are allowed. And in one of his videos, which is available on YouTube, he says, he makes several comments about peyote and says, I was given some peyote juice before I came on, but it's not started working yet. So we know that psychedelics were used and still continue to be used by certain lamas.
I think the interesting thing is, for me, in what way. So in terms of, I know you're writing a second book. I'm not sure if you've completed that one just yet, but
I finished it yesterday.
Oh, congratulations. It's kind of perfect timing. Would you be able to I think in that book I heard you mention once that you've maybe outlined some things that people may be able to explore in the realm of, rituals or practices or modalities that kind of bring us to a state of presence without psychedelics, and kind of fusing the two, there can be certain places that are reached that otherwise might not be able to be explored with as much depth. Are you able to maybe talk a little bit about some of those practices? Just I'm really interested in the ancient practices and the ones that are kind of maybe people are practicing these days, and exploring that territory a little bit.
Well, one of the practices which I've outlined in the book is called the Long Hung. And this can be practiced quite independently of any psychedelic use.
Mm.
And this is just reciting the syllable hung. And to put it briefly, I'll just explain it now. Take a deep breath, and then with every ounce of breath in your lungs, you say home for as long as you can, like this. Ooh. Now, if you recite this for about 7 times, and that's what I would recommend is, as a practice, is to do it 7 times,
Mm-hmm.
then the long out breath combined with the vibration of the lips, as you say, ooh, and not oh or ah, it's ooh, and it makes the lips vibrate. It triggers the switch to the parasympathetic nervous system. And when your body is under the sway of the parasympathetic nervous system, which, by the way, this is also called hacking the vagus nerve, or there are modern terms for it too, that then your blood pressure goes down, your pulse slows, and you enter a very calm and clear state. This is something which can be done without psychedelics, and it's probably best to practice first without using any psychedelics, just so that you get it down and get the whole like experience of it and the feel of it, just so that you can feel that switch over to the parasympathetic nervous system.
Do you hold something within, like a thought or a feeling or
No,
a
well,
certain?
okay. If you want to elaborate the practice further, you can imagine little either syllables written in Tibetan or words written in English of Hung in various different sizes and various different colors emanating from you as you say it.
Does Hung
And
have a
so,
meaning though?
no, it doesn't have any meaning. Um, it's a bija mantra like Om Ah, tree, and so on. These
It's more
are,
about just that vibration that you're creating
yes,
and
yes,
flowing
it's
back into yourself. Yeah.
quite exactly. Now there are practices for reciting all 5 of the major bija mantras: Om, Ah, Hung, Hri, Tram, and what was the last one? Yes, I think I said that. Okay. But this is the most interesting from my point of view, as as you can actually feel it shifting your consciousness.
And this sounds like a very strange thing to ask, and I'm just trying to figure out exactly where I'm inquiring here, but what would be like like a reason or an intention for doing this, or what could be one?
Well, if you are in a situation where you find your heart racing, your breath coming in short pants like little English schoolboys, um, and maybe you can feel your blood pressure rising, you getting a nosebleed or a headache or something, then do this practice. Just, I mean, just um, I normally do it before meditation, but you can use it as a um, a healing practice of the last resort.
Mm.
If you've tried all kinds of medications and they don't work, try this and see if it does.
Mm. The next thing that comes to mind, I'm fascinated to hear about more practices, but this one's a beautiful one, and I appreciate you sharing it. I'm definitely going to give that a try myself. I was wondering if you had any insight into ancient integration processes, or if anything like that ever came up in your research.
Um,
Is there any proof of any of that
not,
happening, or any kind of indication
not,
of it?
not, not per se,
Hmm.
but it's probable that such um, practices were discussed between guru and student after the initiations.
Hmm.
Um, in the initiation, there is a period called the tree in which you are expected to ask questions. And in the tradition of my school, the Kaju, it's not felt to be a proper initiation unless um, everybody involved has asked all the questions that they have in mind, and all the doubts and misgivings they've asked of the initiating guru. And only when everyone has been satisfied that they understand the teachings completely is he allowed to get up and go. And he asks actually three times at the end of the tree, is everybody satisfied? Does everybody have all their questions answered? And he'll he'll wait, he'll chat with you, and he'll ask again, and eventually he asks three times, and he says, "All right, you've got it all now. I'm off," and leaves it to you to put to practice. And if there is any question which arises out of your practice following the initiation, then you can bring it up with him, or if your own personal guru is someone different, you can bring it up with them. Um, if it's about, however, if it is about an experience that you've had in meditation, you're allowed to bring it up once, and once only, with your guru, or one of your fellow initiates. And having brought it up, you're expected to keep quiet about it. This is because if it is a profound insight into the nature of non-duality, by bringing it up again, you're only bringing up a memory of it, and memories can only be made of words. If your experience was ineffable and beyond words, then that's not what you brought up. You brought up a memory of it, which is made of words and concepts and feelings and whatever else you may be able to drag into the conversation, but it's not the experience itself.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting how that that actually forms and shapes how you remember, or how that experience itself is absorbed or changes within you by sharing it. And but you can still share it once, so I guess that would still happen on some level. It'd still be watered down in some way, maybe not as
Uh-huh.
much. Yeah, so it's probably best not to share it at all, unless just
That's
kind of,
yes, that's my opinion. Yeah.
yeah. But there are occasions, I mean, yeah.
Oh,
Like for
certainly.
example, like the Indra's net or web that you shared, that would have been kind
Yes.
of in that same category, but it's maybe there are exceptions, or maybe there are times where it's probably more relevant, or some things you'd keep and some things you'd share. That's an interesting
Now
point.
that's something which I explicitly discuss in my new book. I discuss the experience of Indra's net and my memories of it, and how the description of it is not really my experience of Indra's net. It's only a description of the words and concepts I have attached to it.
Mhm.
It was far more mind blowing than it ever is when I'm describing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what you described was pretty mind blowing in itself, though. So, would you be able to share a little bit more about this book? Like, what else is in it? I know you've already written the one that you probably had most conversations to people about, which seems to be more of correct me if I'm wrong, but more of a research into kind of um, early use of psychedelics and the links to Buddhism. Um,
Uh-huh.
and
Yes, well, I mean,
the new one
basically,
seems
the
to be
book is
more of
in,
a practical guide of some sort.
it is, and it's in two halves. It's psychedelics for Buddhists, and that's one half, and the second half is Buddhism for psychonauts. So, in the book, in the first half, I describe what psychedelics are, what they do, and describe um, the effects of a certain uh, subset of a selection of psychedelics. These are the ones that you might find in the street or might have offered to you at parties or whatever. And these are their effects. And this is how they would be used in Buddhism, or this is how they are not useful to Buddhism.
Mm.
Uh,
Could you touch on that point a little bit? How are they not useful for Buddhism? That's like just for a moment. That's very interesting.
um, Ketamine, for instance, is very alluring and seductive for many people, but I don't think that it is ultimately of any benefit to Buddhism, um, unless you can learn to put yourself in this state. But eventually, I think this state um, is still ego bound, and uh, the 2,5-MeO compounds are um, apparently, I've not taken it, but I've been told that they are fine psychedelics if taken in one hit. But unfortunately, some people have found even one dose can be too much for them, and it's toxic for them. That's what I mean by too much. Not that it's too much mentally, but it's too much physically for their body. Um, and Much of the LSD available these days is actually 2,5-MeO. And one one thing you should know about this is it's very bitter. So if you you hold it in your mouth for a while and it tastes bitter, it's a spitter. Spit it out because it's not LSD. These are a few of um, the substances which I have deemed to be not really useful to Buddhists. Um, I have I have said that LSDs and shrooms and that some of the 2C compounds are very useful. Um, some of the DO compounds are too much like stimulants to be useful and um, often last too long. But um, they could be used. They could possibly be used by um, people who want to meditate for 30 hours or whatever.
Hmm. And moving on to the idea of Buddhism for psychonauts, how would you see that?
Oh,
Like,
oh
kind of.
well, I've given several meditations and some meditations for use um, in um, in the context of MDMA or MDA, and the four positive emotions, for instance, love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Um, there is a meditation which is intended to um, evoke these these emotions on a universal level, to wish all beings to be connected to happiness and the causes of happiness, to wish all beings to be separated from suffering and the causes of suffering, and so on. Now, such meditations as these, and Tonglen, which is simply taking and giving, taking suffering from sentient beings and replacing it with joy. Um, Mentally, of course, we can't really do it in real life, but mentally we can. Um, these are to be practiced um, on psychedelics or on and empathogens such as MDA, MDMA, MDAI, and so on.
Seems to be quite easy to notice when there's like an imbalance or a strong leaning one way or another between, the only terms that come to mind at the moment are bhakti and shakti. So this idea of devotion and kind of awareness, or kind of like a state of insight, and leaning one way or another too much seems to be problematic. You see this in terms of like a blind devotion without a sense of awareness, or on the other end, kind of all this knowing or insight that's not grounded in any continual practice. And to me, it seems like balancing those is kind of what we're talking about here. But there needs to be some kind of an ongoing process that takes place after the amplification that's brought about through the combination of these practices with the psychedelic substance.
Yeah, I think so, kind of, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the, in Buddhism, there is no real appeal to bhakti,
Mm-hmm.
although there is the Shakti, which I mean, literally, it's the term isn't used. The 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 term is Chandali, the fierce woman, who is seen as equivalent to Shakti, the risen Kundalini. Um, There is, however, the emotional content of the four positive emotions, which I just mentioned. And it is um, essential to be able to generate them um, at will, if you like. And I have described a process of meditation where these can be generated at will.
Mm. In the sense of kind of devotion, I'm not sure if there's another way I can put it with Buddhism
Oh,
specifically.
there is such a thing as guru devotion,
Within,
and
yeah.
um, and there are different levels of guru devotion, which I do go into in the book.
Mm.
Um, um, these are these are kind of sort of bhakti. This is what I was considering when you said bhakti.
Mm. Mm. Could you share a little bit more just around those? Just that, because I'm just very curious now, and I don't want, obviously don't want you to just give away the whole book in this chat, but it's very fascinating, and I didn't realize it covered so much ground.
Oh, the book, you mean? Yeah, it does. And I keep thinking of other things I should be adding to it every time I revise it.
The artist's curse, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
There are four levels of guru devotion. There are four kinds of guru. These are not related. They're in different traditions.
Okay.
But there is the guru who points out practices and philosophies and so on to you. There's the guru who is found in books. There is the guru who is found in everyday life. Say somebody cuts you off in traffic and you get angry and you think, oh, that's actually my guru. He just showed me how I can get angry at the slightest thing. And then there is the guru of everyday reality. These are the four different gurus. There are four different ways of merging with the guru, of becoming the guru yourself. I spend a little time on examining Terence McKenna's expression of his admonition not to follow gurus, follow the plants. And I said he probably doesn't mean potatoes and cabbages in plants, but he's talking about psychoactive plants and psychedelic fungi and so on. And I take apart his his notion of guru, which I believe, although he's not around for us to question anymore, I believe he meant these ego-inflated people who believe that they are somehow better than you and more, they're wiser and more divine than you are. And so they allow you little drips of their divinity. And I say that this is nonsense, because we are all enlightened. We are, I mean, maybe they took acid one time and found that they were enlightened, which is all very well, but don't tell anybody else that they're not enlightened too. because we all have the same Buddha nature. Um, and so I do go on at some length about this, and also mention that before accepting anybody as a guru, you should really check them out,
Hmm.
sit in meditation with them for a few months, ask them questions, ask them searching questions about psychedelics. What do they think about them? Are they really who they claim to be? Are they really lamas, or are they gurus in a Hindu sampradaya? Or do they give themselves titles? Do they um, you know uh, inflate themselves, their own egos, at the expense of their followers? All of these questions I've put in the book, and said there are more if you want to, you know, add your own questions that you want to examine your guru by, and more criteria which you can hold them up to and see how they measure.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting to consider where we derive lessons from, and the different kind of ways in which that process can take place, and the different types of teachers, from within, from afar.
Yeah. Now, one of the basic um, qualities of a teacher, as I have pointed out in the book, is that they should be someone who is in the business of showing you are your own teacher,
It's a
of
reflective
showing you that,
process. Mm.
yeah, and uncovering the Buddha nature, taking layer after layer off, and revealing the Buddha nature within, to eventually the what's called the pointing out instruction.
Mm. Yeah, totally agree. I just kind of floating around in my mind space at the moment, and I'm cognizant of time as well, so I don't want to kind of overstep with how much time we have to share. I just wanted to check in before I ask you anything else. How are we going with time, and do we need to kind of close things off soon? Are you open? Are you, because I know it's getting late where
I'm
you are.
I think I should start cooking my dinner soon. So
Okay. Well then
so
we'll definitely.
we've got 5 or 10 minutes left.
Yeah, good to check in, because I didn't want to just keep going without the consideration. And then we can let you off off the hook to go have some food. um, so yeah, because I've noticed it's slowly getting darker and darker on your end, which is interesting, because it's
It
like
is
middle of the day here,
definitely.
sunny. Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to know, yeah, just where to go, since we've only got a little bit of time left. I'm just thinking about this process of this it just seems to me that it never really occurred to me, this idea of MDMA, and you're meditating on this sense of deep love, and compassion, and which it's in itself is quite a powerful meditation, but combined with the thought of it being combined with MDMA, would just seems like there'd be an immense amplification and explosion of love that takes place. And
Hmm.
it almost seems like it's a ramping up thing. So putting the foot down, or putting the pedal to the metal, I guess, in terms of bringing about this energy and really cultivating that from within, and embodying that, and having that experience that then may be able to be more easily kind of referred back to, or gone a little bit deeper, so that you can move into life with that kind of more embodied state, when you're going outside of the psychedelic experience. Would there be any other kind of reasons, or um, reasons to combine psychedelics with meditative states or different modalities, besides amplification?
Well, I did know someone who's passed away now, a guy called Arthur Hastings, who was an English hypnotherapist,
Mm.
who actually um, took, I think it was 7 people, and brought them back into the MDMA state with zero chemical assistance. And he did it by hypnotherapy.
Once that already had that experience together.
They had it, and one of the people had a single experience about 11 years earlier, and somebody else had had several, like on a weekly or monthly basis. And so their experiences were all over the place, but he brought them to um, the same state, the same feeling um, of empathy. And they all said that they were all asked afterwards how their experiences compared to actual MDMA. And they said either it was indistinguishable or it was better because there were no side effects.
Like body
They
load
had no teeth grinding or what have you. So I think that's definitely a modality which should be explored. The use of hypnotherapy with MDMA, and maybe with psychedelics as a whole, because if you visualize yourself as, say, Avalokiteshvara or Tara or Manjushri, and recite their mantras while on psychedelics, maybe visualizing that deity and reciting their mantras would bring about the same state. I don't know. I haven't tried it.
It would be interesting, just as kind of a closing note, maybe if you wanted to share with people that may not have kind of combined psychedelics with any of these practices, or maybe, Buddhists that might not have ever had any psychedelics and are considering kind of venturing into that territory. Are there any considerations you'd like to share, or any kind of, I'm sure there's plenty, and I'd love for you to kind of share where we can access your book as well once it's ready. But are there anything you could just kind of share to people, or sprinkle some seeds out there that if people are interested, maybe it would help them on this path in a safe and responsible way?
Well, first of all, I think these days, test your drugs. They should be, there are far more substances being sold as MDMA now than ever were in the past. And it's possible to buy MDMA, Molly, XE, Mandy, whatever it's called, which has absolutely zero to do with MDMA. So test your drugs. Also, test your drugs for fentanyl. There should be zero fentanyl in LSD, but it is known that LSD, which has been bought on the dark web, is contaminated, or has been found to be contaminated with fentanyl. This is essential these days, that if you don't know the chemist personally, then test your drugs. That's the most important thing that I have to say to anyone. And that's also part of my book.
So that's the biggest kind of safety precaution. Anything to say in terms of the idea of, I don't know, like the other side of the fence, and maybe even like, how do you feel about psychedelics? Do you feel like they're needed in that realm? And I'm sure people can, in the modern day and age.
And now there are plenty of enlightened people who have never touched psychedelics.
Exactly, yeah.
And there are plenty of people who've been meditating for years and got absolutely nowhere, who are adamant that psychedelics should not be used in this context. I believe they're wrong. But that's why the first part of my book is Psychedelics for Buddhists, because I believe that people who have too tight a hold on Buddhism are really closing themselves off to the experience of enlightenment.
Mm.
So and the psychedelics are not for everyone. There are some people who just get too uptight, too scared, too overwhelmed by psychedelics, who perhaps shouldn't take them. Maybe they should just meditate. But do meditate. Um, that's one of the primary concerns I have. People should meditate. Should they take psychedelics? Well, maybe, maybe not. But it wouldn't hurt to try, and it wouldn't hurt to try them both together.
Mm. I really appreciate you sharing that. I'll let you go after this. I just had this thought of the importance of kind of, or the usefulness. I know in my own practice of kind of meditating after an experience, and even allowing that to be part of an essential part of the integration process of just really absorbing and sitting with whatever the experience you went through was.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your wisdom and your wonderful kind of bag of research and inquiry, that all began from this kind of interesting journey you had with this little orange bit of LSD.
With a third of a tab of orange sunshine and a teaspoon of cannabis tincture.
Yeah, interesting combination. Hope you enjoyed this conversation with Mike. Oh, and I must say, if you are enjoying these conversations and you feel like deepening your connection with the show, then you can definitely do that by supporting the mindful media vibes that are radiating out every week from the Today Dreamer podcast by heading over to patreon.com/todaydreamer and joining the Today Dreamer tribe, where there'll be special perks made available, including exclusive podcast episodes, videos, and heaps of good stuff, guided meditations, monthly hangouts. Check it out. I'm not going to say too much more, but feel free to explore that space. Patreon.com/todaydreamer.